Hello, how are you? Hope you are doing well. And today we are going to continue for lecture number 6, survey research or questionnaire development process. In the previous lecture, we talked about two aspects, which are population and sampling, and also doing a research survey. Now we are going to continue with that, and we see how we are going to develop a good quality questionnaire. So first, what is a questionnaire? I believe that every one of you have at least one time filled up questionnaire, or at least have seen it. So in the example in my left hand, some example of questionnaires. So the questionnaire is a set of questions designed to generate the statistical information from a specific demographic needed to accomplish the research objective. And why we develop them? Because they have a purpose. First, in quantitative research, where we use numerical data, we are in need of information that we can translate it to numbers, so that we can ensure standardization and comparability of the data across all the questionnaires, and everyone is asked the same question. So by doing that, we increase the speed and accuracy of recording compared to interviews where we need a lot of time, listening to informant stories and experiences. By doing questionnaires and responded are, in a situation where they just tick an appropriate answer or provide some open-ended questions, so you can save a lot of time. Also, it facilitates data processing, because by coding the data as numbers, it is very easy for us to analyze the data, and therefore we just need to use a software such as Smart PLS or eViews or Stata or SPSS or Amos or other software. But in the qualitative, as I explained earlier, because the data is in words, not in number, so we have softwares like MVivo and Atlas TI that can only help us to manage the data, but we cannot analyze it. So also, questionnaire allows the researcher to collect the relevant information necessary to address the management decision problem. If there is problem, and need to be solved, whatever in management managerial problems, or government policies problem, or environmental problem, by collecting data that relevant to that particular issue and analyze that data, so we can identify the problem and analyze this problem and give a solution or provide a policy implication for that particular problem. So much of data in clinical research, social science research, psychological research is gathered using a questionnaire or interviews, but the focus today is mainly on questionnaire. So the validity of the result depends on the quality of this instrument. Remember, good questionnaires are really difficult to construct, and bad questionnaires are very difficult to analyze. If your questionnaire is not really well constructed and developed, you may finish it in very fast. But remember, after you collect the data, you find it's very difficult to analyze. So in this way, before you start, developing the questionnaire, you have to think twice and three times and four times, and deeply and analyze each question that you're going to ask in order to check its reliability and validity. So also the questionnaire are difficult to design for several reasons, because each question must provide a valid and reliable measure, and we have seen that in previous lecture class, so I'm not going to discuss them again. And so the question must clearly communicate the research intention to the survey respondent. So the questionnaire must really be relevant to the research objective, and has a way of communication with the respondent in a simple way and very efficient way. Also, the question must be assembled into logical, clear instrument that flows naturally and will keep the respondent sufficiently interested to communicate, to cooperate. If the questionnaire are not assembled in a logical and a clear instrument, the respondent may find it difficult to answer this question, and they will be discouraged to continue, and therefore your response rate will be very, very low. So there are quality, aims in the survey research. The first, the goal is to collect information that, first, remember, we say it is valid, means the measure of the quantity or the concept that is supposed to be measured. And the second, reliable, which is measure the quantity or the concept in a consistent or a reproducible manner. So I have already discussed this concept, but maybe I will just give a brief description again. Validity means that the question really means what it's supposed to be measured. The measurement. If you want to measure poverty, means that your question exactly measuring that poverty, but not income or not hunger. And reliable means the question that you measure are consistent or with all respondent. If respondent A understand your question in manner B, respondent C, he should also understand it in manner B. If respondent 1 understand the question in manner A, but respondent 2 understand it in manner B, then the reliability is very weak here. And also, it must be unbiased, measures the quantity of a concept in a way that does not systematically under or overestimate the true value. So when you ask a question, you must ask exactly what is supposed to be asked and supposed to be measured. Neither underestimation nor overestimation. And discriminating also can distinguish adequately between respondent for the whom the underlying level of quantity or concept is different. So improper design can also lead to incomplete information because respondent found it very difficult, to understand the question, and sometimes very complex, and therefore they will not continue. And inaccurate data, some of them even they feel like, oh, I need to finish it, but they just simply answer, and therefore you will get inaccurate data, and therefore you will get bias result and policy implication. And also, if you improperly design, it could lead to a higher cost, because you will spend a lot of time and a lot of money, in conducting this questionnaire. At the end, it cannot be used. And those are the criteria to consider. First, you have to ask, does it provide the necessary information? Does my question really provide all the information needed to answer the research question and research objective? Second, does it consider the respondent? I mean that the question that I ask does consider respondent characteristic. If you are dealing with poor people or farmers, well, maybe their formal education not that really high, is totally different the way when you write for example, to academics or scientists or journalists. Does it meet editing, coding, and data processing requirement? Because you may ask question, but after later when you want to code, you cannot really manipulate the coding. Manipulating not means that changing the numbers, but for example, I give you an example. You ask a question, how much is your income? And you give, for example, let's say choice, or less than 1,000, between 1,001 to 2,000, between 2001 3,000. But this one actually is better if you put it in open question, because let's say you want to do a correlation analysis, or analysis that require your variable to be in ratio. So if a respondent say my income is less than 1,000, you don't know exactly how much. Is it 999 or 1,000 or 950? But if you put it in open-ended question, then you can record. For example, if you want to change the ratio to a category, then you can do it. If the respondent say my income is 850, you can put it as number one, category number one, which is less than 1,000. If he say my income is 2,500, you can put it in category number three, which is between 2,001 and 3,000, and so forth. Then what is the link between researcher and respondent? So first we start here with the researcher translating data requirement into a set of questions along with instruction. Then this is will lead to a personal interview questionnaire. Then therefore the interpreting the question and instructions, and lead to the interview. After interviews, interviewer will what we say administrate the questionnaire and pass it to the respondent. So respondent, they providing responses, and give it back to the interviewer. The interviewer again, with his personal interview or questionnaire, will record the responses. Then after recording responses, then it will goes back to a researcher, and the researcher will process the data. So can be this in that way, or can be also from this way, a researcher to a telephone interview. Then after the interviewer, he will conduct the survey and pass to respondent, and respondent goes back by mail, or mail or online questionnaire, and so forth. So this is, the mechanism of, administrating the questionnaire. So a questionnaire is only as good as the question it asks. Because if your questions are not very good, the questionnaire will be not good. If the questions are very good, then the questionnaire will be also very good. So for that, we avoid the complexity of questionnaire design. We have so many things that need to avoid them, and we will see them in later slides. But for example, consider the following question that appeared in a mail questionnaire from a presumably experienced researcher. So the question read like, do you consider the many marketing approach text adequate for most of the business majors at the undergraduate level? And they have choice between yes or no, and if not, briefly, why and why not. The first thing that you have to notice, or you need to ask, is that really an easy or difficult, to answer it? What do you think? I think that you have so many doubts, so many unclear, terms that need to be justified, for example, or elaborated, for example. What exactly the researchers means by adequate, most, refer in the question. So in that way, respondent may answer yes or no, but actually he does not mean it, or may at all do not answer because he does not understand, the question in first place. So what are the elements of questionnaire design? First thing, you want to ask yourself, does each question have the most appropriate form? Example, structured, there is no structure. And is each question relevant and properly worded to obtain meaningful, valid responses? And this is, we talk about the validity of the question or the questionnaire, which is already described. Means, is the question really has the same meaning that's supposed to measure? And is the sequencing of a question likely to introduce any bias? When I ask, a question and the sequence, sometimes I will ask question that leading to another question, and therefore it will lead the respondent and force the respondent to type or one or two types of the answer, and here we come to the biasness. Another one are the layout and the appearance of your questionnaire conducive to accurate and easy data collection. That is very important, because if the layout is not up and the appearance is not appropriate, or is very complex, respond also they may even confuse how to answer that questionnaire. What are the major decisions in questionnaire design? The first, which is the most important, and is a content. What should be asked? I mean that you can ask so many questions. You can ask a lot of questions, but the big issue is that what really you should ask. And here where you go back to your hypothesis, you go back to your objective, you go back to your problem statement, to your research question, and from that you should understand what exactly type of question you need to ask to answer those hypotheses, to answer those objectives, and to answer those research questions. So the second wording, how should each question be phrased? I mean, in a passive or positive way, is it the language, or the structure should be easy or complex? And we will see that later. You should write in an easy language and in very simple structure. And the sequence, in what order should the question be presented? And that's very important. You always put in your mind that you should first start with very important questions, and you put the most important question in the first half of the questionnaire, and then followed up by less important question. And the last one, the layout, is what layout will be best to serve the research objective. So as I said, the most difficult step in specifying exactly what information is to be collected from the respondent, which is the content. Then we start by the content. Questionnaire must meet 5 requirements. Are the question relevant? Do they pertain the research problem, as just now I explained? Are the question accurate? Do they accurately depict the attitude, the behaviors, etc. intended to investigate? Are they valid? Then do respondents have the necessary information? I mean, the respondents are qualified. If you want to study or you question, how earthquake affect, or the people, intelligence or stress, you do not go and ask someone that have seen earthquake in TV. You must go to a respondent that they have experienced the earthquake, and therefore those are the qualified respondents. So the respondent understand and interpret the question correctly, and this will talk about reliability. Is your questions exactly give this understood in the same manner, in the same way by different respondent? And will respondent give the information? Because if your question are more sensitive, may lead to that respondent will not participate in that questionnaire, or may not answer that question. And there is so many sensitive issues that need to be consider. You have to be very careful when tackling with them, like issues like sexual harassment, like this LGBT, like for example, like child abuse, or marriage abuse. These kind of things that really respondent may not really answer. So how should the question be asked? So we have several types. We have a non-structural question, open-ended question. Then we have structural question like fixed response question, dichotomous question. We have multiple choices and scale responses question. Let's see one by one. First is an open-ended question, which is the most famous. An example of open question. You give a question and give the freedom to the respondent to answer. How old are you? I can say 21, 25, 30, 40, 50. What do you like most about owning your own home? And you may say whatever that really you like. Will you please describe your thoughts about the person who shoplift items from a grocery store to keep from going hungry? So people will give their thought openly. Then the advantage of this type of questions is it will give you a wide range of responses, and information can be obtained, and also answers based on responded, not researcher frame of reference. Means that consumer terms, means that respondent here, they will give you really what they feel, really what they believe, what they perceive. and not because they follow your choices or your preferences that you prefix in other type of question. Also can help interpret close ended question. Why means because you give you a variety of answers, so you may also can ask or you can answer the question why this happened. Particularly useful as an introduction to a survey or topic. For example, what it is when it's important to measure the salience of an issue, a quality of an issue, or what we call it the quality of being particularly noticeable or important prominence. So also when too many possible responses to be listed or a noun. So what are the disadvantage? Also, see, it has an advantage, but also it has a quite number of disadvantages. For example, ability and or willingness to respond to the answer. Sometimes responders also they don't know what to answer. Even you give them an open-ended question, they don't know. They prefer the guided one. Also, interviewers' ability to record answer quickly or summarize accurately and probe effectively, because they are talking or writing, and how you are going, to gather all this information as quick as you can. So it is time consuming. Also, interviewers' attitude influence respondent. The way you behave with the respondent. You may influence his answers. Time consuming, as I say, interview session, tabulation, classification, assignment, validation. But the most important difficult part or disadvantage is difficulty in coding, because it is words, not as a number. Then it is very difficult, because sometimes in open-ended they will give you so many choices, so many stories, so many experiences. How you're going to code this all, and also require respondent to be articulate, and respondent may miss important point in that manner. So it also lead to a non-response at all. So now we talk about the second, which is structured questions. An example of structured question, for example, in which of the following categories does your age fall? Instead to say how old are you in the previous, then we give that less than 18, 18 to 30, and so on. Or what do you look do you look for most in a job? Instead to keep it open and you give him work that pays well, work that gives a sense of accomplishment, work that where you make most decision by yourself, or work that is steady with little chance of being let off. But in this case, you may notice one thing here. It may respond that all of them not applicable for him. So I think the good way is to add another one. Others, please specify. So if the respondent really cannot find these here listed options, he can have more information. So as I say, advantages is ease to understanding, require less effort on part of interviewer and respondent, both of them. A respondent is very easy for him to answer, and an interviewer also is very easy for him to collect the data. Easy of tabulation and analysis, because you can translate to numbers, and less error prone, because if a respondent feel that it comes under this category, you just click on it. Less interviewer bias, because you don't interfere when interviewing. Less time consuming, and answer directly comparable from respondent to respondent. But it has disadvantages like middle neutral categories often selected inappropriately. For example, you ask a question and ask them to rank between totally disagree to totally agree. This is neither agree or disagree. Sometimes people are confusing because they are between. He disagree almost that he is not disagreeing, and he doesn't know if it goes to a disagree, or it slightly disagree, or to neither agree or disagree. So they confused, and different. But respondent, they may give you different choices, even though actually their choice is supposed to be the same. So less opportunity for self-expression or subtle qualification. Also less involving for respondent. Respondent, they don't have a freedom, to add, what they feel of, or they think of, And also, order of the response categories can have a major impact on the result. Because I give you an example. If I say rank between 1 to 10 this question, are you happy? I may put 7 because I feel like 7, I'm very happy. But someone uh, actually he's not very happy but just happy, also he put 7. So you can see we have the same code, but our level of happiness are different. So each one he perceive it in a different way. So another one is dichotomous question. We all call it a dummy variable, where it has only two values: yes or no, 1 or 0. Do you smoke cigarette? Yes or no. Have you ever watched CNN news? Yes or no. Should the Alberta government give consumers an energy rebate? Agree or disagree? So this they have an advantage: is easy to administer and tabulate because only two numbers. But it has a lot of also disadvantages. For example, prone to a large amount of error, since polarized respondents prevent gaining information on a range of variation, and also fail to communicate any intensity of feeling. When you say, do you smoke? Yes or no. If I just smoke one cigarette per, 6 months, or let's say one cigarette per 1 month, I'm still smoke, I'll put yes. And someone, he smoke one packet, 20 cigarettes per day, and also he still put one. And do you think that is logic? Is no. So that it will give us a lot of biasness in the analysis. So my advice to you: do not use these dummy variables or dichotomous variables only if really it is necessary. So a multiple choice question. For example, when you give a question and you give multiple choice, here, in your opinion, which product category is the most suited for making purchases on the internet? And you give them so many choices like automobile, books. But remember, better once you finish the list, you add others, please specify, because maybe the respondent couldn't find what he suit him or fit him in these categories. So like second question, what do you like about Bank of America online banking service, 24 service? Then transaction privacy, no need to travel, and at the end you have other, please specify. So multiple choice question are all possible alternative included. That is question that you have to ask. So that I say, if you feel that not all the possible alternatives are included, then you should add others and please specify. But again, to have too many alternatives make it too difficult to do the coding and to create the data. And the position bias, sometimes I feel like I have more than choices, and sometimes I mean that I like one, but most, and another one is less, but almost are together. So responded, they feel difficult really to choose. I have been experiencing that when I fill up questionnaire. Sometimes I also confuse exactly what I should take. And from also we have the scale response question. For example, when you give a question and you give a scale approximately, how many long distance telephone calls do you make per week? 0 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, and so forth. So the response categories in this question follow a natural sequence. Then close ended question, what where the response choices are designed to capture an intensity of the feeling, like a scale, stepper, semantic differential, and also it is easy to code and more powerful statistical tool to interpret. Also, the main problem is respondent misunderstanding. As I say, sometimes they come to a situation where they misunderstand or they are confused where really to answer. Also, response choices should be collectively exhaustive, also taken together, mutually exclusive, and not overlap. Overlapping means that if we come to this question, you say approximately how many long distance telephone call you make per week, then you put first one 0 to 1, 2, 1 to 3. Then if someone has one call, where do you put it? In the first or in the second? So this is overlapping. So now after we discuss about all the types of questionnaires, now we have to know what are the things that we really need to avoid. Complexity of the question, and this is very serious. Always, use simple, direct, conversational language, and do not use a complex language, a complex sentences, complex question, because it will confuse the respondent and lead to no response or a biased response. So, for example, in the first question, in which of the following do you typically invest your liquid asset, which is very clear, insured account, or of the total number of miles you drove during the past month, approximately what percentage was traveled, in driving and from work? Is it 10%, 20%, or 30%? It's very simple. Um, and a respondent can understand it. And also, you need to avoid leading question. A leading question is that should suggest or imply certain answer. Means that when I ask the question, I have a suggestion on it. For example, the first one: don't you think offshore drilling for oil is environmentally unsound? So you already click the mind of the respondent that this should be environmentally sound. So most of them, they will say yes, but actually he does not mean it, because you influence him by leading a question. Or the second: do you think the quality of a product of the market today is as high as it used to be in 10 years ago? So that question also lead him, the highlighted one, high as it. So the respondent, we could say also most of them yes, because you lead them. But how to solve that? Instead to write it in that way, we write it in a different way. For example, the first question, we just say, what is your feeling about environmental impact of offshore drilling? Then you give him offshore drilling is environmentally sound, offshore drilling is environmentally unsound, or non-opinion. This is, you don't have a leading question here. You cannot lead him, so you will let him to you will let the respondent to decide. The second could be written as, how do you feel about the quality of product on the market today compared with the product or the quality of the product in the market 10 years ago? Product quality is better now than 10 years ago, or product quality is worse now than 10 years ago, or product quality is the same now as 10 years ago, or no opinion. So this question also is not leading the respondent to a particular answer. So things to avoid also loaded question. A loaded question suggests social desirability or are emotionally charged because it's too much heavy. For example, uh, uh, have you purchased a high quality Sony TV this year? So what do you mean about this question? I mean that respondent may feel really shy if he has a simple TV, not high quality. And do you still beat your wife? Who's going to answer that question? It's too much loaded. I mean that. But of course, if you feel that question, it must be, asked. You may, redesign or reconstruct the question in different way and still, to tell him, do you still beat your wife? And then you can say that, do you think, beating a wife is appropriate or not appropriate, once, there is an argument. So there is other ways how to ask a question that may lead to the approximate, the question that you want to ask. Then ambiguity questions, ambiguity and vagueness, words such as often, occasionally, usually, regularly, frequently, many should be used with caution. If this would have to be used, their meaning should be explained properly. For example, this question: how often do you eat eggs for breakfast? Frequently, occasionally, rarely, and never. Someone eat one egg per week, and he put it like occasionally. But someone also eat one egg per week and he put it rarely. So they eat, the same one egg per week, but they give you a different answer because they have different perception on that. So instead to ask that question, it is better to ask this question: on average, how many days per week do you eat eggs for breakfast? Every day, 5 to 6, or something like that. Or how many eggs per week do you eat? 1, 2, 3, or something like that. That one is much better. Then, we have also long-worded question. For example, as we say just now, the question, thinking back to the last time you went on holiday, but excluding any weekend or short breaks or any holidays you took in this country. What type of holiday was that? Oh my God, responded, start reading the question. After he finished, he forgot what he started, not reading. He forgot what is all the question is about. Avoid that. The question should be simple, as short as it can, but serve the meaning, serve the purpose. Another very serious issue is a double-barreled question, a question that refers to two or more issues within the same question, where respondent may agree with one part of multiple statements. Suppose, for example, the following question is to be used in conducting a survey of general public, and the question is like that: do you feel firms today are concerned about the employees and customer? But my answer is yes for customer, but no for employees. What I'm going to do? I don't know how to answer. If I say yes, that means both of them. But actually, I didn't mean that. So, for example, a no response can be interpreted in three different ways. The respondent feels firms are concerned about neither employees nor customer. Or respondent feels firms are concerned about employees but not customer. And another choice, respondent feels firms are not concerned about employees, although they are concerned about customer. So, in order to avoid that, we are going to split this question to at least two, because we have here two issues. If there is three, we split it to three. But since we have two issues, which is employee and customer, so the first question should be: do you feel firms today are concerned about their employee? Yes, no, or no opinion. If I say yes, I mean about the employee. You say no, also about employee. Then second, do you feel firms today are concerned about their customer? Then also responding will say yes or no. So one question we split to. If we have three issues, then we will have three questions. If we have four issues in one question, and then we will have four questions. A one-sided question, for example, represent only one aspect of the issue on which respondent reaction are being sought. For example, do you feel firms today are concerned about the employee? Yes or no opinion. Or would you agree or disagree that the deregulation of the airline industry has benefited consumer? Yes or no. So that is, I have only one side, but in order to solve that, it can be revised as: do you feel firms today are concerned about the employee? Then the answer is concern and concern, or non-opinion. But second, we may write it in that way: do you feel that the regulation of the airline industry has benefited consumers, has had no impact on consumer, or has hurt the consumer? Then you will have so many here. You will have has benefited the consumer, has had no impact on consumer, has hurt the consumer, or no opinion. Then another one is unbalanced question. So, for example, how important is price to you in buying your car? And you can see more important than after extremely important, then somewhat important and important. You can see the categories are not really in well sequenced and balanced. So the balanced question should be: how important is the price to you in buying your car? Then you put very important, relatively important, neither important nor important, then relatively unimportant, and very unimportant. So it follows the order. It is well balanced. And also making implicit assumption. A respondent can be generally influenced by what the respondent thinks being asked of them. For example, are you favorable, indifferent, or unfavorable toward a 10% increase in city taxes? And here I may say I'm unfavorable because I feel like increased tax burden by 10% is too much for me. But actually, I could say favorable if the question was not implicit in nature. For example, the above question can be improved as: are you favorable, indifferent, or unfavorable toward a 10% increase in city taxes? Then we continue to repair potholes in the city street. So as I am a car driver, I know that will benefit me because I also suffer from those potholes. Then instead to reply unfavorable as the first one, I will reply favorable because potholes in the city street is very concern for me. Another question, do you drink coffee while watching football, baseball, and so on? I drink coffee while watching football, but not baseball. So what I answer? So the above question can be rewarded as during which of the following activities do you drink coffee? Then I will say attending games ball or attending sporting events or watching games ball or watching a sporting event. So that is more accurate and easy to understand. So also another things to avoid burdensome question that may tax the respondent memory. A question, for example, you ask, how many tubes of toothpaste have you purchased in 3 months? I don't remember how many toothpaste I bought. Have you purchased toothpaste in the past 3 months? Then embracing sensitive or threatening question, as I say, have you charged more on your credit card than you should? Or you use a third person, do you think most people, these questions are very sensitive and threatening questions, so people may not really answer it. So now we come after we finish the things that we need to avoid, how we to design questionnaires. First of the thing is determine survey objective, plan what to measure. As I say, check your objective, your hypothesis, your research question. Then you will understand what type of question you're going to ask. Decide on format. Is it personal interview, telephone, self-administrated, email? And formulate question to obtain the needed information that you need to ask. Decide on the wording of the question. That's really important. If you are interviewing prime minister, it's not the same that you're interviewing someone who never attended a college. If you are also interviewing a scientist or a student, it's not the same. You're interviewing someone from the street. So decide on the question sequence and layout of the questionnaire, and also use a simple and using a sample, test the questionnaire for omission and ambiguity. You check your questionnaire and check if there is any, omission of your question. You may, forgot to ask a question which is very important to measure a particular research objective or research question. Correct the problems, pre-test again if necessary, and there where we do the pilot study as we explained in the last, class. And this is another the process of to design the questionnaire. The first step is translate data requirement into a rough questionnaire draft. Then check the question form. Then you ask this question: are any changes needed? If yes, then you go and check the question relevance and wording. But if no, right? But if yes, go back and revise the rough draft again. Then ask any question, or any other check to be made. If no, you go to the pre-test and draft the questionnaire. Then make the changes, supported by the pre-test, and then you ask again the question: is another pre-test needed? If yes, go back and do another pre-test and go follow. If no, go and compare or prepare the final draft of the questionnaire. But here, if it is no, as I say, you go strictly to check the question relevant and wording. If there are any things to change, go back. If yes, go back and revise the rough draft and do the same cycle, on that. But if no, go the next. Check the sequencing of the question. Are any changes? If no, you continue check the layout. But if yes, you go back and revise. Then after checking the layout, if any other change needed, if no, you go straight and ask any other check to be made. If yes, make the necessary checks. If no, then you go and do the pretest. So here, let's say if there is other checks to be made, then you go and make the necessary check and do this again. Check the layout, check the sequence, and check the question relevance, and check the question form, and do it again until you finish that process. So what are the steps to design a questionnaire? The first is write out the primary and secondary aims of your study. What is exactly you want to investigate? And, then write out the concept information to be collected that relate these items, and review the current literature to identify only the validated questionnaire that measure your specific area. So when you review such a review, it will help you. Sometimes you adopt those questionnaires. They are already validated, so it saves your time. But you do that only if that really those question or questionnaire have similar measures as yours. Otherwise, if it is not compatible, then you cannot use them. Then compose the draft of your questionnaire, revise the draft, and assemble the final questionnaire. Let's go one by one. Define the aims of the study. Write out the problem and primary and secondary aim using one sentence per aim, and then formulate a plan for a statistical analysis on each aim. Then make sure to define the target population in your aim. Then step 2, define the variables to be collected. Write a detailed list of information to be collected and the concept be measured in the study. Are you trying to identify attitude, needs, behavior, demographics, some combination? So each one, it has a different way of asking a question. Translate all these concepts into a variable that can be measured, and you can use theories, you can use previous empirical studies, to help you do the measurement. Because from the measurement, you will ask the question or the relevant question. Define the role of each variable in statistical analysis. Is it a predictor or a confounder on outcome? Predictor is independent variable. Confounder is the variables that what we call them variables that or factors that influence both dependent variable and independent variable, like moderator, like mediator. Then the outcome is, of course, is the dependent variable. Then review current literature review, as I say, to identify related surveys and data collection instruments that have measured concepts similar to your to those related to your aim, and this will save development time for you, and also comparison with other studies if it is appropriately. So proceed with a question if using only a subset of an existing questionnaire, as this may change the meaning of the score. So what you do is you have to contact the author of the questionnaire to determine if a smaller version of instrument exists that has also been validated. Then step number 4, compose a draft. So first is to determine the mode of the survey administration. Is it face-to-face interview, telephone interview? Is it self-completed completed questionnaire, computer assisted questionnaire? This is very important in order for you to help you to design the appropriate question and structure. Write more question then will be included in the final draft, because after you are going to omit, those are not really relevant. Format the draft as if it were the final version with appropriate wide space to get an accurate estimate as to its length. Longer questionnaires reduce the response rate, remember that. So try to don't do a very long questionnaire. Place the most important items in the first half of the questionnaire, as I explained earlier, to increase response rate on the important measures, even in a particular completed surveys, and make sure question flows naturally from one to another. There is no disjoint or disconnection between them. Number 5, revise. After you finish the draft, shorten the set of questions for the study. If a question does not address one of the aim of your objective, you just omit it or discard it. Refine the question included and their wording by testing them with a variety of respondent or pilot study. Ensure the flow is natural. Verify that terms and concepts are familiar and easy to understand for your target audience. If you are talking about farmers, do not use very high academic language, but use a normal language or simple language. Keep recall to a minimum and focus on the present past, or what we call this simulated recall is a research method that allows the investigation of a cognitive process through inviting participants to record the concurrent thinking during an event when prompted by, for example, a video sequence or some other form of visual or records. So assemble the final questionnaire, decide whether you will format the questionnaire yourself or use computer-based program for assistance, maybe surveymonkey.com, Adobe Lifecycle Designer 7.0, GCRC assistance. You can Google them and learn about them. At the top, clearly state the purpose of the study, how the data will be used, instruction on how to fill out the questionnaire must be given, your policy on confidentiality. You must make sure that you make it clear to respondents that they remind, their names will not be shared and the information also will not be shared, and this will be kept confidential for the research purpose only. Also include identifying data on each page of multi-page, paper-based questionnaires such as a respondent ID number in a case the pages separates, and also it will help you to go back to that particular questionnaire if needed. Number 6 also in assembling final questionnaire is group the question concerning the major subject area together and introduce them by heading a short descriptive element. For example, question about lack of healthcare facilities. So you just group all the questions about healthcare facilities together and you put lack of healthcare facilities, lack of education, and you put those questions that tackling that education. And order a question in order to stimulate a recall. I just now explained the recall and order and format question to ensure unbiased and balanced result. So again, include a white space to make answers clear and to help increase response rate. Space response scale widely enough so that it is easy to circle or to check the correct answer without the mark accidentally including the answer above or below. So you make that spacing a little bit enough. Open-ended question, the space for the response should be big enough to allow respondent with a large handwriting to write comfortably in the space. And also in the close-ended question, line up answer vertically but not horizontally, and precede them with boxes or a bracket to check, or by a number to circle rather than open blanks. And also use a large font size, for example 14, and high contrast black on white. So easy for people to see the question, and they should not struggle, about seeing them. Enhance the response rate by when writing a questionnaire and assembling the final questionnaire, edit with a view toward saliency or the quality of the questionnaire, the apparent relevance to your objective, the importance to the study, and the interest of the survey to the respondent. If respondents are not interested in that particular area, they will not answer. Consider either pre-notifying those in your sample or sending reminders to those who will see the survey if it is self-administrated. Studies have shown that making contact with several individuals increase the response rate. When you remind them, they will respond. If possible, offer an incentive. Studies also shows that offering an incentive increase the response rate. By giving them, for example, a voucher of KFC, McDonald's, or giving them a pen or a token of appreciation, whatever that motivate them. And also you can create an online questionnaires. Creating online questionnaires is simplified by growing number of websites that allow researchers to design and launch their survey form on site. We have surveyz.com is an example of that. We have Google Form, we have Microsoft Form, we have SurveyMonkey. For example, surveys that allows users to register for a free trial and sample the functionality of the website. But also Google Form, it is free of charge. You can have your questionnaire. There are also a number of sample survey posted on user to view. For example, the site is powerful tool that allows anyone to create professional looking survey very quickly. So as I said, we have surveys there, the ultimate survey software solution, online survey software, customer satisfaction survey, employee survey, web survey software. Those are the tools. So as a conclusion, in designing a questionnaire or constructing a questionnaire or developing a questionnaire, you need plenty of time. You cannot do it in a rush, in 1 day or 2 days. First, design your questionnaire from a research hypothesis, again, as I say again, that have been carefully studied and thought out. Means that the research hypothesis should be developed based on a very strong theoretical background, so that your question, when following the hypothesis, will be more valid. So discuss the research problem with colleagues and subject matter expert in a critical to developing a good questions. And this will help you, if your questions are unanswerable, then, if your research question or research problem is unanswerable, and therefore your question will be also very difficult to construct. You cannot construct a question to answer something which is unanswerable. Review, revise, and test the question on the iterative basis. Do the pilot testing. Examine the questionnaire as a whole for flow and presentation. You have to consider the layout, the writing, the language, the simplicity, complexity, and all the things that you need to avoid as we study. So here we come to the end of today's lecture class. I hope you enjoy it. Again, if you still have doubt or any question, please write in the comment below, and I will address them as soon as I can. I wish you good luck and thank you very much for listening and watching to this video.